if you want a big deal, you got to think about a big problem that you can solve. I feel like that we are his only account. So that's the feeling he got, is that I was putting that effort, and that's kind of build that trust. And it was wonderful because I was building the trust with a person who was the naysayer. So when he started turning, everybody else is like, well, I should certainly go in the same boat if he's going on that boat. So if you don't have a conviction, you're not going to have that energy that brings people together, or you're not going to have the energy that will persuade customer to do something differently. I believe trust was the number one reason on why we won that deal.
You're at the chairman's club. Like, what really happened? There's a lot of legends and stories there. I'm curious, like, how that went down, and if you can go back to that time of like getting the check from Benioff on stage. Welcome everyone to this month's Fireside Chat, and today I am thrilled to have Alpesh Patel on. He is Mike Fiascone's former boss over at DocuSign, and that's how I got connected originally. And Alpesh I learned about without knowing his name originally. I heard about him because in my this was in 2013 when I first started at Salesforce, and I new hire onboarding and new hire training. They announced that one of the sellers the previous year or two had been awarded a $4 million commission check, and I was coming off selling copiers, and I my biggest check might have been 100,000 or something. So I was like, whoa, this is amazing. This is why I went into Salesforce. And they told the story of a man who became an agent for a large insurance company, and he closed a huge deal. And I learned several years later that this was Alpesh's deal, and we're going to get into it in a minute. But Alpesh was one of the top sellers of all time at Salesforce. And he didn't just stop there with that deal. He repeated his success the following year. He went on to lead a team. Then he went on to DocuSign, where he started the whole industries and go-to-market vertical, and had a whole group of people working for him there, including Mike Fiascone, who had some of his biggest years selling into the insurance space. And what I like about Alpesh is his background is just very different. He comes from an engineering background. He's very analytical. He's not the flashy salesperson. And it just goes to show that what you think makes a great salesperson is actually not the qualities and the characteristics which actually lead to success when you're talking about selling the biggest life-changing deals. So I'm thrilled to have you, Alpesh. Welcome to our show, our video, whatever you want to call this, our fireside chat. Thanks for coming on, man.
Oh, wonderful. I'm really excited. And Mike had also told me a lot about you, Ian, and how you have really created this community to help others and a new business. So very impressive, and looking forward to chatting with you and also answering any questions.
Perfect. So we'll spend about 30 minutes to 40 minutes interviewing, and then we'll open it up so you guys can learn directly from Alpesh. So I just want to start with that moment. You're at the chairman's club. Like, what really happened? There's a lot of legends and stories there. I'm curious, like, how that went down, and how it felt. Like, if you can go back to that time of like getting the check from Benioff on stage.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously that was a incredible moment, just being in front of the whole company, seeing Salesforce go into next frontier, right? If you think about, until that point, every single big deal Salesforce had was always in the B2B sales,
Mhm.
because Salesforce was always viewed as that sales productivity tool, CRM tool. This was the first time Salesforce had a big deal with a B2C company. And this whole concept of Salesforce going about, we help you connect better with your customers, this was kind of the beginning of that frontier. So it was super exciting, great energy, and it was a wonderful time, not surprisingly, to get that check. But to me, that was like 8 weeks or so after the deal was closed. And
Mhm.
the deal, when it was closed late on the last day of the year, that feeling was very different. That was like a relief, because we were working on this negotiation for just the legal aspect. The MSA took 2 months to negotiate. They had hired a external law firm, and we're going through this, and everybody was exhausted. So it was done. It was like, it wasn't the really joy. There was no high fives. There was nothing else. And also because from the customer's point of view, that wasn't a really end of the journey. I mean, for them, that was actually beginning of the journey. And I had spent so much time with the customer that I was thinking like them too. So I kind of felt, okay, my responsibility really starts now, is when somebody has committed that they have put that trust in me and Salesforce, now we get to deliver. And I had a 8 a.m. kickoff call the day after the deal was closed. So that's kind of the mindset I was in. So that didn't feel like anything. But after 8 weeks, once things were already progressing and stuff, it was a wonderful time to celebrate.
Mm. And was it like a real check or was it like a fictitious big, big thing that everyone can see?
It was a fictitious big check. I probably should have kept a picture of it, but I may have it somewhere. But it was one of those gigantic check that was there.
Yeah. Well, I'd love, I know a little bit. We're not going to name the customer, it's confidential, but it was a large insurance carrier. And I'd love you to give some context to the group on how you were able to win that deal, what it took. I heard that you became an agent or something like that. Maybe just give the story of what it really looks like to know your customer and what you had to do to earn that level of trust.
Yeah. So I think what will help is to set the stage. Let me give you a little bit background, right? So I joined Salesforce, and after 5 months, I was given this account. And then once I'm learning more about this account, I learned that the previous AE left this account and left Salesforce because he thought there was no way we were going to make any money here.
Mm.
So he leaves the company. I get this account. And I also knew a little bit that they had spent $500,000 doing a pilot, like paid pilot. And there was a readout of this pilot. That was my first meeting with our executive sponsor. So I go in, it's a 2.5 hour drive for me. It was snowy day, I still remember. I go in there and we get hit with the news that the news was that they completed this analysis and they concluded that Salesforce wasn't really mature enough company for their complexity and their scale. So they were not going to move forward. Not only they were not going to move forward, they actually were not going to include this CRM modernization as a project in the next year's budget cycle. So we're like, we're going to be out for 18 months before even having any conversation. So that was the starting point.
Mm.
So, but they were still my biggest account. So I was trying to figure out like,
How many accounts did you have assigned to you at this
I think
time?
I have 6 accounts or so.
Okay, so they're the largest in revenue and in employee
Exactly,
count.
by far, right?
Cool.
And so my first thought is to say, okay, well, I had this mental framework. It wasn't as thought out. So now in hindsight, I can probably put that in a more of a framework format. So the first is that if you want a big deal, you got to think about a big problem that you can solve. And as I was talking to some of the people who were part of this pilot and still kind of doing the postmortem on what happened and why did not win, I started to learn a little bit more about their culture and the importance of agents, and that was their moat, that they had 100,000 agents throughout the country. And that's why they were so successful, and they pride on that, and they knew that was their moat. And through that, I started getting the sense that this was 2011 or so. So that's where the social media was becoming so powerful. Mobile phones were becoming ubiquitous. So they were starting to realize that this could really uh, change how people work with agents. An agent may get replaced in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first realization to saying maybe there is something here, that this industry and a company is going through a major change and there is a major problem they can solve. So that was kind of always a step number one, is to identify something that is so significant for the company that tends to be, and then at DocuSign and other places, my team had a lot of big deals, but this was one thing that was always common. There was something that was there. So then a step two was that how do we reframe this? Because they already spent $500,000 and they're not interested even talking to us. So that's where the reframe came, that the first POC was done in the context of how Salesforce can make their agents more productive.
Mm-hmm.
And productivity improvement is not a big problem or is not an urgent problem, right? I mean, they've been doing business for probably like 80 years. So if I do it now or next 3 years, it doesn't really matter. But this concept
Mhm.
of their agents losing grip was a big thing. So we changed our value prop to say, we can help you keep your agents connected in this new era where your demographics can have omni-channel presence. So they can talk to your agent, but they can talk to call center, they can go to website, and the agent will know about everything. And you can take this social media and amplify using your 100,000 humans. So actually you can, the moat you have can be moat even in a digital era. And how do you go about doing that? So when that discussion started, all of a sudden there were a lot more people wanting to talk to us. So that was kind of the second problem around how that was. The third problem was more around creating a sense of urgency because they were still thinking about that this can take for like, it's going to take a few years before we have to worry about it. So we have to create the urgency. So that was another part. And then the fourth part was really going deep and wide. Any big deal, it's going to include the business owners, going to include IT, security, legal, procurement, and their agency owners. So how do you go and identify all of these different players? And it's not only based on titles, because titles could be deceiving. You're really looking for who are the influencers in each of these areas and building connection with them. And going that wide and deep was kind of the next stage in that. And I would say the last was really getting the whole team from your company involved. Because when you're talking to people with all of this different background, you are not going to be an expert in all of that. So your job becomes the translator, where you take their specific needs, educate your team appropriately. Because if you get your VP of app dev to talk to your customer, he doesn't know enough about your company or your customer. So how do you educate that? So that's kind of the role I played in doing that. But as I was learning more about what will be the concern, that's where the story about I applied to be an agent for this company and went through that process, and through that process made some connections. But that's when I heard more of this concern, because when agents are talking among themselves, this was a concern they had, that we may not be relevant. So that's where that really idea came up on how to reframe that.
Mm. So who'd you take that to? You said, "Hey, we missed the mark on agent productivity, but we've interviewed agents." Did you tell them you became an agent? Was it just kind of silent shopper stuff you were doing, or how did
Oh,
you message that to the executives when they just told you we don't want
yeah.
to talk to you?
I told them about that later on, about I became an agent once, not right away, because that may not have been viewed as positively. Uh, but it was going back to the same group of people, right? Because I understood the culture of this company, it was very hierarchical. So you kind of knew where the starting point were. And so I would start with kind of giving them some following up. I think one of the things here you talked about, like 8 points of connection, right? So I'll find a new report that says, hey, by the way, the new report came out is that mobile phones adoptions is highest among people age above 50. So I'll like send that to them to say, hey, by the way, I know this is something important to you. This is a report. There's something else comes up from one of the other customers of Salesforce where they came up with some new ideas. I'll forward that with some of my comments.
Hmm.
There were times where I would just drive 2.5 hours each way to meet our point of contact and hand him a printout of the report and just walk out just to get that face time. So through the process, the guy who was actually our biggest blocker, and he was still the primary contact. So he saw me putting this effort and he started opening it up more. And then as I get more, he's like, this is interesting. Kind of can you tell me a little bit more about this? And how does really Salesforce chatter come into play? Because I'm not quite getting that. So I kind of started educating him a little bit more. And it took a few weeks before that and eventually this is the guy who became my champion, who kind of told me who was who and whom I need to talk to and whom I not need to talk to and all of that. Right? He was kind of my guide navigating through the org. But it took that few weeks of effort and showing dedication that I showed up there every time thinking about them, not thinking about how I can get my foot back in the door. And that was a genuine effort on my part. And he recognized that to
Mm,
say, look, there is somebody here who is giving me this information not to just get the next meeting. He understands the business problem. He puts effort into it.
mhm.
And actually, ironically, is after a few months, this champion who became my champion, we had my SVP come and visit this customer. And as I went to go get the car, he was asking her to saying how many accounts I had. And she said, I don't know, maybe like 7, 8. And he's like, really? I feel like that we are his only account.
Mhm.
So that's the feeling he got, is that I was putting that effort, and that's kind of build that trust. And it was wonderful because I was building the trust with a person who was the naysayer. So when he started turning, everybody else is like, wow, I should certainly go in the same boat if he's going on that boat.
Mhm. I think you bring up an interesting point that I want to dive into. A lot of people would have walked away and said, well, don't talk to us for 18 months. I got a naysayer, negative. Like, what was it about you that kept you working for them without necessarily an opportunity or an immediate champion? Like, what is it inside of you that made you want to help this customer versus going to the other six or seven and just kind of running away? Did you just love insurance, or was it something that, I mean, yeah, I'm just curious because that's a decision that says, like, I don't care if they're going to buy or not. I want to help them. I want to invest. I want to make them successful. I want to teach them. I want to educate them. I want to challenge them. But a lot of people wouldn't do that if they were told immediately, like, you're not relevant and don't talk to us for 18 months. So what was it that led you to want to really invest in that type of type of way for them before you saw the opportunity?
So I did not know anything about insurance. This was the first time I was covering an insurance account. So like industry knowledge wasn't there.
I was just being
Right.
facetious.
So the part of the it was maybe my multiple things in my upbringing, Polly, right? One is being analytical, to saying this one account represents really 70% of my territory
Hmm.
because that's how large it is. So if I were to be successful, I can't ignore that. So that was kind of the desperation was the mother of invention type of thing.
Hmm.
Then other part is that I came from IBM, and IBM had a huge presence at this account.
Hmm.
So I knew the size of the deals that can be there. And I talked to the guy who ran, I mean, IBM had probably done, actually, IBM had done $1 billion deal with them a couple of years before that.
Wow.
So and I knew the guy who ran IBM practice really well. So I talked to him, and I got a little bit of that, right? So I talked to Accenture, I talked to a number of other people to saying, is there enough change that's happening here there are there enough signals here that can suggest that there can be a big opportunity. That combined with talking to a lot of my peers and just doing my own study to say where, like you always look for a external factor that is going to create some urgency or change. So obviously at the time, Salesforce always talked about mobile and social. We just didn't know how that will impact every industry. So I put more time thinking about to saying, is there really relevance here? And out of curiosity, I'm always have been a learner in my life, right? I'm an engineer by education and have gone through that. And maybe upbringing is that I always had to go through challenges and doing something that I wasn't done before. So it was somewhat gratifying as an engineer trying to figure out the problem that's unsolvable.
Hmm. I love it. And I think I just want to hone in on one thing you said for everybody. There's something called the 80/20 rule. And people think it's Pareto principle, 20% of your activities determine 80% of results. And for anybody watching in this community, you got to pick your 20% of accounts that represent 80% of your revenue. And that is so critical for success. So if you see that this account makes up X number of billion in your territory, or X number of employees, like you have to go all in with them because it's you don't need to close all seven accounts and do a bunch of 500K deals. What this was a nine-figure contract for context. And that time, like for everybody I've had on this whole show, every single one that's been $1 million earners or big has had one or two accounts they went all in on. And I don't know if that was something that you've seen at DocuSign throughout your career, but I tell everybody less is more. If you really want to make the big bucks, seven-figure deals, eight-figure, nine-figure deals, you got to pick one or two Has that been your experience too for how you've managed big accounts in your career?
Absolutely. I mean, even if I look at my team, I used to tell them saying, don't fill up your calendar with activities. There's a lot of people believe in managing by activities.
Mm-mm.
And to me, actually, boredom is a wonderful thing where you don't have anything to do because you're conscious of not doing things for the sake of doing it. As a sales rep, that agitates you, that have nothing to do. That makes you uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to go figure out something to do. Versus if you fill up your calendar just by so it makes you feel better about to saying, I'm working really hard, that's never an answer. So
Mm-hmm.
what you said about is very critical is to qualify where you want to spend time and where you don't want to spend time and leave some time empty where you don't get that automatic gratification that I have a lot of things going on.
Mm-hmm.
Be honest with yourself to saying, okay, these are the real stuff and I'm going to focus on it and I'm not going to do some of the other stuff that is just mundane work
Mm-hmm.
or unnecessary work just to fill up my day so my boss feels like that I'm doing a lot of work. And it's at the end of the day, nobody cares. So I
Amen.
completely agree
Amen.
with you.
And I would say what I did when I went and tripled my income was I had three non-negotiables. Number one, I'm not going to go into a deal unless I have executive sponsorship.
Yeah.
Unless I have an executive priority or power, I will not work a deal. So that early on got me in front of a lot of executives. Number two, I'm not going to work a deal under 150K. We had a
Yeah.
team called ECS, and I said, I used to play small, no longer. I'm only going to
Yeah.
work certain deals, right?
Exactly.
And then the third is I'm not going to work a deal where I can't do deep discovery unless they let me in and analyze what they're doing and meet with their people and give access. Like I can't give you a
Yep.
proposal or see if I can. And those are the three non-negotiables: executive sponsorship, right? Discovery, deep discovery, and the ability to um, make sure that we had the biggest problem. Essentially, I was working on big problems, and that means a large deal size. And if you're only working on that, you can win 70-80% of your deals, and they're much bigger. So I just share that because I know you operate the same way. Um, for everyone just who's watching, we have thousands of people that'll watch this interview, and you kind of lived the dream in a way. You retired what, at 50 years old? Is that right?
Around,
Recently?
yeah.
Congratulations, by the
Thank
way.
you.
What would you say for like tech, for people who want to use sales as a vehicle to be able to build wealth and retire young and you kind of did it. What would you say, based on your experience going from engineering to sales and just, that journey for you? What would you say for people who want to follow that path? What do they really need to focus on and spend their time on if they want to repeat the kind of results that you got?
Well, I mean, I don't know if there is really a one specific thing. I mean, a lot of the things that you've been talking about, those are the basics, right? I still think that sales is a lot more science than art, although everybody thinks that is art. So the frameworks are the same. How you execute the framework is where the art comes in. And there is absolutely art, right? I mean, somebody like Mike was just so phenomenal in so many different ways that I can't even dream that I can get to that level in executing that. But if you look at any successful people, the frameworks are what we're talking about here is be genuine, earn trust, like the core values that you have. That always is so critical. Selling
Mhm.
is human. Be curious because you have to understand the new problem. Have this innovative mindset. And we're not talking about inventing the next chat GPT, right? Is the innovation for sales rep is going to be how do you reach out to somebody if you're blocked? How do you come up with a new proposal that is valuable for both companies? How do you reframe the problem that people can see it differently? How do you find different partners and bring them together? So
Mhm.
all of these things are there. And great sales reps always found something different to do. And that's what I kind of talked about is not filling up your day with activities is actually a great thing because it gives you time to think about some of these new ways of doing it. If you're going from a call to call to call, you're just following the same path that everybody else follows.
Mhm.
So there is a value in having this area where you feel compelled that you have to come up with something new because you have no way to move forward. To me, that always has worked in my favor. And it's not comfortable, right? It's extremely painful, where you look at everybody else and saying, wow, they just have so much going on and I have nothing. And still kind of using the time to come up with something that will be clearly a game changer for you.
I think most sellers are dopamine junkies and they chase that low-hanging fruit, that immediate reward. And if they
Yeah.
don't see it, they freak out. And you kind of have to be able to sit in the pain and just sit and be patient, really, to have that space to do deeper work. How do you build trust with clients? You talk a lot. I keep hearing you talk about trust. What are some of the things that you did to establish trust, and specifically with executives,
Yeah.
with people that are know their business better than you do in many, many situations?
So, I mean, it's really, I look at this as the consistency, competence, and courage. Right? So let me kind of elaborate more. Trust is one drop at a time, but you could lose it all in one moment. Like you can't just say a great meeting and they're gonna trust me. I kind of assume that trust kind of starts at some level, and your reputation is gives you that up or down.
Mhm.
So that's a starting point. Then you have to build up to this. And consistency of doing what you say you're gonna do every time with the right intention, because your customers and everybody else in your life, they're not stupid, right? People see through it. So they
Mhm.
will see your intent and your actions both. So both your intent and actions has to match with your words. So and it has to be that way every single time, that you can't really take a vacation from it. So consistency is kind of the number one. The second one I think about is competence. And why that matters? Because with competence, you're bringing value to the relationship. And when you add value to the relationship, it creates the padding, right? If something doesn't go right, people will still tolerate it. But it also gives you more opportunity to build trust because, as I say, it builds over time. So it gives you more opportunities to build that trust and continue to build that. And competency here will be the industry knowledge you may have or the cross industry knowledge you bring with the right intent, that your intent is still to help somebody else, and and then they will reciprocate with you too. So
Mhm.
now it creates a bigger snowball effect. So that's why
Mm.
a adding value through competence makes a lot of things. And the third thing is what I don't think most people normally think about is courage. And why that matter is you don't earn trust by just being likable, by telling people somebody what they want to hear. I feel in my life, a lot of times the trust was there when I told somebody they did not want to hear. And they realized that I was the person who will tell them what
Mm.
they don't want to hear with the right intention and for their good.
Yeah.
And once that realization comes, like your trust level goes to the whole different level versus anywhere else. And and having the courage to be able to do that at all level. I
Mhm.
not think about saying, wow, that's SVP. I can't really say him, he's wrong. And it may not always work. So sometimes it may not work, and that's okay. But you got to take that risk if you believe in it. Like you don't challenge somebody just to be
Mhm.
an asshole. You challenge somebody because you truly see something, you believe in it, and you want to convey that, and you believe genuinely that that's going to help them. So if you do that challenger with the right intention, to me, that just multiplies your trust very quickly.
Mhm. I love that. Was that hard for you to do that, or is that in your nature? I know for me, I have no issue speaking
Yeah,
up and
I
calling
think it's
calling someone's baby ugly or something like that. But what about for you? You said you're engineering, you're introverted. Is that natural to like tell people what they're doing isn't necessarily the best way, or
well,
curious?
engineers are introvert, but when they speak, they say something bad to you. So I think it was more natural for me.
They're
They're not
critical. They're
very
looking for things that are wrong. So it's like,
exactly.
I guess
They're
that
not
makes
very
sense.
polished and stuff. I had to learn the other way. I had to learn to restrain that from saying that all the time. And Mike probably have witnessed me putting my foot in my mouth many times while we worked together.
Yeah, yeah. Talk to my wife. Gotta tone it down sometimes. Um, okay, so you built trust with consistency, with courage, keeping your word to yourself, and with competence. I love that answer, and it's what I'm hearing from you is it's about the person you are. Because everyone now can do a point of view. I just did a webinar where I literally gave people the secrets on point of view development with ChatGPT, but like
Yeah,
they can't, that human to human piece is, I think, more important than ever, frankly,
yeah,
because of AI and because of
exactly.
the entry level jobs that I believe are going to be going away very soon, sooner than later, because of
Yeah,
what AI can do. Even, even we're looking even in my own company. I told Davidson, let's look at an AI BDR to really work 24/7. And it's not to replace him, it's to be able to give him the higher value activities to focus on versus dialing down. So I'm curious kind of where you think sales is going, and with especially with the advancements of AI, and what do you think the sellers of the future are going to need to really double or triple down on to stay relevant, to connect better amidst so much automation and intelligence that's been going on in the past year, especially, it feels like.
I love this. This is where I get to pontificate. Really, I mean, when I think about it, like I'm not in the field yet right now. I mean, I do a few advisory and stuff, so I have some understanding. But I even wrote an article on LinkedIn on this topic, is to say, I think it's actually AI is going to be great for people who had the true fundamentals of sales really well done.
Hmm.
Because if you think about in last, maybe say 20 years or so, sales has become more of a machine, and CRM and automation and a lot of these things came in where it was very activity driven.
Gong, call
She makes
recordings, sequences, all that
sequences,
shit.
right? So all
Yeah.
of this, and a lot of successful or mediocre salespeople who can survive were because they were great at either process or content generation.
Hmm.
Because creating the next presentation and creating a QBR and a new presentation for every customer and writing the documents and emails and all of this, like content creation and following process was a big part of doing sales. So that's where you filled up your activities. But that's not really is a differentiator. So what I think AI is going to do is that make those things such a commodity that nobody cares,
Hmm.
right? Because you can generate content so quickly. You can have automation in the process and think getting up there to Salesforce. So being disciplined in process and being content generator is going to be less and less value as time goes on.
Hmm.
So how do you reinvest that time onto things that matter? And if you look at the fundamentals of sales, a lot of things haven't changed. Sales is still selling is still human, and those human aspects. And how do you really connect with somebody so they will tell you more than what's in the RFP? I mean, Mike was incredible in that process when he was part of my team. Is like that connection, that genuineness, ability to earn trust so somebody will open up. Right? As soon as your AI is listening, everybody shuts down on what they tell. But on one conversation, they will tell you things that really can help you decide the strategy you're going to need for this. So I feel that all of these mundane tasks we're doing, if that's what your MO is, that you can create content then faster than your peers and you are great at putting every check mark in Salesforce and doing it consistently, that's not going to be as valuable versus that human connection. And now you have to learn to do the human connection via virtual stuff because not that many customers are going to have people coming back in. I don't think that's ever coming back to the way it was before. So in a new era, is even if you're using AI, how do you add value to your customer? How do you tell them something they don't know yet, what they can't get from AI? How do you connect the dots across the different partners and bring new insight to that? So the content is valueless, insights are incredible. So focus on how do you synthesize all of this data and all of this information to come up with insights, a different point of view above and beyond what ChatGPT can just give you directly because everybody else can do it. How
Hmm.
do you add in the what you learned from humans? How do you make people comfortable so they will tell you more? So you can do a deeper discovery. How do you be a better listener? Right? So you a lot of things that can spew out content now, but you need to be better listener. How do you see those human cues that they were? All of those things are going to be more valuable going forward. And the other part is that do this with who you are, because people become great salespeople from a different things. Like I was analytical, I was curious, I was learning. But there are other people who are extremely successful, who are incredible, charming, and they had a great people connections. Like it's not a, I always feel blessed when I'm with people with the different skills because I learn from them. But I never want to change who I am, because if
Mhm.
I try to be as funny as Mike is, I will be in my grave
Yeah.
before I can even get anywhere close to it.
He's pretty
Right? It's
funny.
not possible. Like, and it, I would burn out trying to go that path. But Mike is incredible, and I respect him for that. And I try to learn a little bit from him.
Yeah.
At least I can get chuckle on his face right now, because maybe 10 years ago,
He dressed
like,
up as Richard Simmons in our mastermind. It was
yes,
the
exactly,
best
right.
thing I've ever seen.
But it's feeling comfortable with who you are
Yeah.
and weaponizing your strength to your success. That's a key, that you can't be with somebody else's weapons. So kind of understand
Be
what makes
yourself.
you great and use that. You don't want your fatal flaw, so you want to kind of compensate, but not to the point where you're focusing too much on it, and never compete with anybody. That's why I felt like that I always was intimidated by peers because I thought they were always so great, but I was never uncomfortable with that
Hmm.
because I knew they were great in their own ways, and I was had my own strength. So I can learn from it, but never really felt competition there at all. And I think that's going to be the key, is that how do you hone into your own strength and feel completely comfortable with being who you are and accept that and use that to your advantage.
Be yourself. What if you don't like yourself?
Well, then change it. If you don't
But
like
I'm not
yourself, that's
like
the only reason to change it.
here's why the personal matters so much, because how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah.
If you're putting on a mask, if you're trying to be a chameleon at work and you're living a double life, and believe me, I've lived this. I've
Yeah.
gone down the road of like not being authentic and trying to fit
Mhm.
in with the people I was with, and it doesn't end well. And I really want to just have everybody listen to that, because he's not saying anything that is groundbreaking. He's saying
No.
be authentic, be yourself, be comfortable in your own skin. And many people aren't. Many people tend to talk badly to themselves, not recognize what they do well, not lean into their strengths. And when you tell yourself that, how do you think other people are going to perceive you, right? How you talk to yourself is how other people see you. So you got to start with the internal work of being comfortable with who you are. And that starts by living with integrity, by doing what you say you're going to do, by living your values, by being honest, by working hard, by being someone you're proud of first. So I think you do those things, you work on your habits, you work on being a kind person, you start to show up that way at work, and you don't care what people think because you know you're being true to yourself. I just want to know if you have anything to add in terms of how people can build confidence to be comfortable in front of clients and comfortable in their own skin, because I think you're hitting on like the main thing that makes sellers great is this authentic. When you're authentic and comfortable, you can focus on your customer. You can be present. You can be curious because it's not about you. So how do you foster and develop that as a seller maybe who doesn't even like themselves, or maybe I don't know, like what's your take on this?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So let me first saying why you should do about it. And I think about like three categories. So there are external factors on why you should do it. There is like internal factor. And for me, also there is a personal factor associated with that.
Hmm.
The external factor are more obvious, right? Is if people trust you, they're going to recommend you. We all live in a small community. Like every rep, we had hired a DocuSign, we had done a back channel. And if there was ever a doubt or a slight negative comment on people's character, we never hired them.
Hmm.
And nowadays, you can see LinkedIn, everybody's connected to everybody else. So your reputation precedes you and who you are. And reputation is going to be who you are really, not what you pretend to be, because everybody else can see who you really are. So never feel that arrogance that you can hide that. So that's number one reason, right? Is that that proceeds and customers are going to know it and people will introduce you or help you. A lot of the factors come into picture.
Hmm.
So if you don't have that, your chances of success are pretty low. Now, internal reason is I believe conviction as one of the key values for anybody who wants to be successful. And why that's the case is because if you have conviction into your mission, into your company, in yourself, it shows, it like radiates through you.
Hmm.
and is contagious, and other people are going to absorb that. Is that energy that is there that is not quite visible, but that's what makes a difference. And if you have conviction in yourself, if you wake up every day and you look at your uncombed hair and you still like yourself, that's a wonderful thing.
Or an ugly beard.
But if you wake up and you are ashamed of yourself, then you're never going to have that conviction, right? You can pretend to have a charm, you can have a fake charm, you can memorize scripts, but you can't really fake a character, and that becomes visible. So if you don't have a conviction, you're not going to have that energy that brings people together, or you're not going to have the energy that will persuade customer to do something differently. So to me, that's more internal reason. And then a personal reason for me is I grew up in India. My father was a high school teacher. We're a family of five growing up. And at one point, our family income was $5 a month.
Wow.
But we're happy, right? To be our food, like it was there. The love was there. The integrity was there. Great lessons were taught. And then so it was all different time. So I'm not suggesting that money I have made doesn't make a difference. It makes life really wonderful. But at the same time, the incremental of amount of money I can earn, if that comes at the compromise of my inner peace, it's not really worth it. And because I have seen where the whole spectrum of not having any money to having a good amount of money, I've kind of seen that that's not what the differentiator is. Life certainly is better, and I always will continue to be motivated to make money or kind of preach that. I'm not one of those guys who will say money doesn't matter. Money matters a lot, especially when you don't have enough. It matters a lot because it can be a difference between treating somebody in your family or not treating. So I'm not doing that. But if it comes at the expense of your internal peace, or where you don't really see yourself, if you see yourself and you don't like it, then you have to ask yourself a question: is it really worth it for that part? So that's kind of how I personally kind of say this is all these three factors come to play for me.
Character, conviction, and integrity. I love it. These are all things that we taught. In fact, yesterday we did a whole session on the qualities of a top seller, and you're hitting on all of them, and you weren't in that session. So this isn't Ian's qualities. These are just the top qualities. One thing you talk a lot about, and you mentioned this in our prep call, was this idea of value selling. You said, I'm big on value selling, and I'm just curious kind of what that looks like for you, and maybe when you introduce it with your clients. Because a lot of people think, oh, it's an exercise we do at the end to like help people justify the investment. But like you feel like with you, it's embodied into the way you think about where and how you spend your time and thinking from a finance perspective. Maybe just talk about how you see value selling and how you sell with that in mind.
So I look at value selling in two parts, right? There is the value sell in terms of helping your customer understand the value of what your solution in your company will do. And in that area, I kind of think about is that it has to be believable, it has to be sustainable, and it has to be achievable, right? And on top of that, it has to be differentiated. So if you're generating value, but if everybody else can do it, you don't have that. An example I always give is that if what is the value of water for every human being? I mean, incredible. If you don't have water, you die. But you can't charge a lot of money for water because it's a commodity, it's available everywhere. So how do you really show differentiated value? But if you're the only seller of water in desert, you can charge gold for it and people will pay for it. But because they created a differentiator there, that you have water in a location that nobody else has it or nobody can get to it. So access is your differentiation. So you always have to think about that value has to be differentiated. It has to be attainable and believable, and it has to be sustainable. And there's a lot I write and think about it and how you do that. And it kind of comes back to the same, you have to understand the problem that you're focusing on, and not just the problem your company can solve. I always encourage everybody, you have to understand the bigger problem, because then your value add to your customer, you're helping them understand the bigger thing, not only your part, and they will give you something in a return. So that part is, there's a lot of science behind that, and ROI studies and business case and many other stuff. and you have to incorporate that. But remember the fundamentals that it has to be believable and attainable, because you can show a big number. If customer doesn't believe it, it means nothing.
Mm.
And it has to be sustainable for SaaS solution. That is not just a one time. So you can create a science around it. And then other side of value selling is what we have been discussing here, is not only you, but also like you have to be part of the company that shares those values. And I've been very fortunate to be part of Salesforce and DocuSign. Both had those values, even to the point, this big deal we're talking about, I believe trust was the number one reason on why we won that deal. And when I was preparing Parker Harris for executive briefing, I emphasize that. So when we had only had a one executive briefing with this customer, and this was after they had kind of told us they were going to buy us, and they just wanted to make sure. And it came up, and so Parker Harris had his segment of the presentation in this executive briefing. He had only one slide and only one word, and that word was trust.
Mhm.
And only thing he talked about is why they should trust Salesforce. And he talked about the architecture behind it, the philosophy, how we work with our customers, how we have evolved with our customers, how we have failed with our customers and learned from it, and then kind of made it better. Like all of that, being completely vulnerable, and that was the key part. So
Mm.
to me, that's the other part of the value selling, is that you and your company are exhibiting the values that your customer appreciates,
Yeah.
and that matches with your customers' values. And it may not work with every customer, right? So if your customers are operating on a compromised values, maybe you will fail. But I'm okay taking that risk, because most customers I have worked with and most people I have worked with, they all have high values. So I always go with that assumption that my customer and my people in that customers always have high values, and I'm going to match that. And it's okay if they don't appreciate it, then that's so be it. But I don't need to change because of that.
I love it, man. And trust was one of your core traits that you looked for when you started, actually becoming a leader. You told me that there's four core traits you look for in top sellers. I want to open it up to the group in a minute, but just to share it with everyone, the four traits you mentioned. Number one was trust. Number two was innovation or resourcefulness or finding ways to help customers. Number three is conviction or confidence or belief. And the fourth was courage, being able to speak the truth. You didn't look for, intelligence per se. You didn't look for hardworking. You didn't look for charisma. And I understand your team all did really well, and
Yeah.
they all performed. I'm just curious for you as a leader, how did you get the most out of your team, and what did you find that were the common denominators for, the people that really wanted to be part of your culture? And I know you had a lot of different personalities of the sellers, and you really focused on these four things. But I'd love to. My last question to you is like, a lot of people think sales reps are coin operated. You said that's not the case at all. So, what would you say for any leaders or for anybody, even sellers, like what did you do to get the most out of your people that really resonated and made them really want to work hard for you and your company and show up um, to do their best?
Yeah, like a lot of things to unpack there. So let's kind of talk about the values, right? I think most of them we covered on why I believe innovation and courage and conviction
Mhm.
and trust are important. So we'll kind of say that to me, those are long lasting. If somebody has a couple of big deals, to me, how they got to the deals. If they got to those deals using this, then it's repeatable. Otherwise, it could be luck. So to me, this was a blueprint on that. But it also was a foundation of creating a great culture that I don't believe at all that people are coin operated. Like just think about people go to work, money is always important, but there's a lot more factors. And people go in for personal growth. They go for respect that they receive from that, the type of friendship they build with people who work among themselves, the new things you will learn, the career growth you will have, the mission that you're not compromising your integrity, right? You kind of walk in happy. All of these things come into picture. And if you only hire coin operated people, they will the outcome you will get will be less than the sum of each person's value because there will be a lot of friction, right? So it negates that. Versus if you hire people on this base of values and foster the culture that supports those values, you multiply everybody's value in that, right? So everybody comes in with their strength, and now your team strength is the sum of everybody else's strength, and you become
So
a
true.
hunting pack together. And I mean, Mike remembers when I had an insurance team, actually recently wrote an article about it, is we had everybody in the team had a different strength. They came from a very different point. And what was great is that everybody else got better because of their peers,
Hmm.
because everybody contributed toward this. And I certainly got like 6 times better because I had 6 people teaching me all the time in my team and
Hmm.
got better. So to me is, and the gratification people had, like we as a team ran together a marathon for most people who had not run even 5K. And the gratification you can get not from your work, but also in your personal life, like that was something I'll remember forever.
Hmm.
So I don't believe for a second that people only work for money, and there may be a small segment that will be there, but that's not what I want because I don't think you can build a winning team and a great company and a lasting impact if you have that, because that combination will break apart very quickly because everybody will be selfish. They will look for their own stuff, and then
It's
it will be a chaotic environment.
it's so true. I talked to Tandra about this yesterday, but our culture here, we have 12 people now. But I hire people like that are, I don't know what you call it, the underdogs, the bandits, like people that have others look past them and they
Yeah,
weren't given a chance and they just have a vengeance to go out and prove themselves. And there's such a fire like in each of our coaches and our sellers
yeah,
because of where we come from and who what we have to prove. And it's like the chip on your shoulder kind of thing, but also service and kindness and authenticity. And we haven't lost anyone yet, knock on wood. But
yeah.
I agree with you so much about giving people something more to work on and just recognizing people and really just giving them um, not accolades just with money. The money's got to be a good opportunity, but more recognition and giving them a role where they feel like they're contributing to what you're building together. So I love your stance, and I know you're doing more on leadership, and we have a lot of sellers here, but I'm curious to see where you go with helping sales leaders build better cultures because I know there's just so much opportunity there. I do want to open it up for the group, Alpesh, and I can talk to you for hours because we're so aligned. A couple questions that people have. Michelle and Sally are both similar questions. So I'll ask Michelle's. I know Salesforce has world-class sales training, but curious if you ever read something, a book that stands out, or taken a course, or done personal development work outside of just your company to really differentiate yourself, to develop yourself, and if so, what was that helped you become the best
Yeah.
version of yourself?
I'm not a big reader, but there is a one book for sales that I use that as my Bible in a way. Is Selling is Human by Daniel Pink. And I
Hmm.
was lucky enough that Salesforce had invited Daniel Pink to come to Salesforce, and I had a time to kind of talk to him and stuff. But he talks about the new ABC of selling, and I think what he has said has stayed consistent towards generations of selling. So that's probably one thing. In terms of others, I mean, in my life, I have a lot of time driving to my customers, and I'm not a big music person, so I have a lot of time to do introspection. So I use my time to just think through this and kind of talk to myself, both to get better and kind of learn about it and synthesize it. So a lot of the things came as a result of that, that I'll kind of observe other people around me, and I have worked with incredibly great salespeople, and then learned from them to saying, okay, what is it, and trying to put that in a framework and trying to make it relevant for me, to saying which one of them kind of applies to me or how do I do that. So it's more self-taught, a lot of these concepts, and many of those were kind of happened progressively, right? I can talk about 3 things now, but it didn't really come to my mind as a 3 things. It's
Hmm.
that after doing that, I can sit back and say, oh yeah, these are the 3 things that work together.
Beautiful. And I don't know if you have you ever taken an Enneagram before?
No.
I'll give you a test. Or I'll gift
Okay.
you a test.
Okay.
I'm guessing 8-5 combo, investigator challenger combo for the personality type. Just to sit and be introspective. That's telltale for number
Yeah.
fives. I'll share more offline, but let's keep going with the questions. What limiting belief did you have to let go of to actually live the things you're describing now? Peace, purpose, and a sense of enoughness. And how did that shift really happen for you?
Well, I don't know if I have an answer for that because like none of these things are gradual. It really is a snapshot of the life you live through. And I think about it from my upbringing and my mother teaching me hard way the lesson of integrity when I was probably 6, 7 year old and came home with extra money from a shop of a vegetable. And she made me go back and return it and apologize to him that even if I knew I had received extra money, I did not correct his error. Like so, like it's so that was there. And 30 years ago, my dad became very sick and family went through a trouble and you kind of came back. So I've seen trouble and always have found a way, like things work out. So then it gives you the belief and confidence, but it also keeps you grounded to saying, simpler stuff, uh, somebody's kind word or help. Like I just think about so many occasions of people helping me in my life
Mhm.
that I feel that uh, those were the things I cherished, and that's what I really need. So all of these things build stories. I don't really have a good answer on how I got to that point, other than it's just the sequence of a lot of events in a life, sprinkled with some introspection, that probably brings you to that.
I love it. I think it's a great answer. Um, Yvonne's asking what inspired the 2.5 drive to drop off a report to the insurance company. Was it pure customer obsession, something you read, or just instinct? That kind of persistence and creativity isn't always obvious. What made you decide to go the extra mile?
Yeah. So that was actually by design. I'm always a big believer of understanding your customer's culture and reflecting that, right? Not only kind of saying what CEO talked about, I really focus on customers' culture, how they operate, and respecting that.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned, because for this customer, IBM had done a big deal, so I went and sat down with the guy who was leading the billion-dollar deal for IBM and
Mm.
ask him to say, tell me about this customer, how they operate, how they make their decisions, who are the players, who have titles, who have influence, what do they value, and he kind of helped me understand, which became obvious afterwards, to saying like, look at how this company is built. The company is built on people connection. What do they believe their moat is their agents who have that personal connection. So they expect the same from their vendors,
Hmm.
that you are putting that extra effort in helping them. So with that, so that was by design. I knew that I had to get more face time with them, but because where I started from, where they told us we don't want to see your face, I had to come up with creative ways.
Hmm.
So I would kind of say, hey, I'm happen to be in town anyways. I will really stop by, and instead of sending you an email, I wanted to do that, and I will get a 2 minutes of conversation. Especially the guy I was initially working with, he really never have a unnecessary conversation. So literally, it will be 2 minutes max, and Mike knows the person I'm talking about, right? So it'll be just to the point, but then gradually he will kind of open it up, and then that became a great champion. So that was purely by design because I knew the culture of that company, and I wanted to exhibit the same in a return.
I love it. We're going to wrap up in a couple minutes. Drew will be on soon. Don't worry. My a couple last questions that I want to just hone in on. We're getting asked, working through the doubt, Ed Rinaldi, did you have doubts about your point of view? Did you have doubts about your vision for them and, even the deal and whether or not they were going to do it? Like, how do you work through your own doubts or insecurities, or do you not have many of them? You seem pretty
I'm
confident.
perfect. I'm just kidding. No, no. I mean, insecurities and vulnerability are really a fertile ground, in my opinion, right? That's how you get better. And none of these things, like a lot of these things I talk about, were not all my ideas. So I'm a big believer of just being a good listener and observer and observing other people's ideas. For the deal we were talking about, like we created a iPad app that many years ago, but it was one of the Salesforce's business partner who did it for us.
Hmm.
There's no way I could create anything like that. So is when you have a genuine intent, in my view, and authenticity, people want to contribute towards your cause
Hmm.
and without you even asking. And if you are open to getting other people's ideas and kind of incorporating that, that happens. So I had a lot of struggles. I mean, I could never write. I'm a really extremely thankful of ChatGPT. Like I always struggled to write. English is not my first language. I didn't speak English until I was 21 years old. That was always there. Like every time I had to write an RFP or an initial paragraph, I'll be sweating bullets.
Mm.
And but my boss was great, so like he helped me slowly get to that point, and I got better. So leaning on other people, being aware of your weaknesses, not being afraid to ask for help, like those are all the things I would probably suggest to overcome them, and still have a conviction that I know eventually I'll get out of it
Yeah.
when I got stuck. Like that's the only belief because I've done it so many times.
Hmm.
And then somehow it works out that way.
I think there's a good point. I want to add to that. A couple ways just to get out of that self-doubt cycle is remind yourself, that you always find a way to figure it out and
Yeah.
trust yourself to be able to be resourceful. Number two, trust in your intention, trust in the fact you're trying to help and serve. And the third is you got to believe it first, right? If you're doubting your point of view, if you're doubting your ability to help, like get yourself convinced, run it by other people, talk to your customers, like until you're he talks about conviction. If you don't have conviction, right? That's what the opposite, self-doubt is the opposite of
Yeah.
conviction. So you got to do whatever you need to do to build your own conviction around how you can help your clients first and then take it to them versus taking something that you're not really believing in. So those things help. Last two
I'll leave
questions.
with one thing, Ian, is to me, conviction without vulnerability is arrogance.
Mm,
So you have to have vulnerability and you still have conviction because you worked through that vulnerability and you came out. If you never were vulnerable, then you probably don't have enough self reflection. So me, most of the time I felt awful and I thought I can't get out of it. But
mhm.
there was this belief because of the history that I will get out. So that was a conviction that I know I will get out. I didn't know how. But vulnerability has to be key. If you don't have that, then you're gonna bleed into the arrogant side.
I can get really spiritual in a minute, but when you're on your knees, when you're praying, when you really surrender, that's when the answers come. That's when God delivers. That's when people come into your life. That is vulnerability. I know for my own life, that's when I've
Yeah.
been the most powerful is in my weakness. So thank you for for calling that out because that's when you're ready for help. That's when you receive it, and people want to help when you're in that place. So, last question or two is around career. Gerald's asking, as you progress with your career, how did you find companies that offered the kind of opportunities that you needed and wanted? And what were you looking for in a company to make sure you could grow as an individual and also increase your earning potential?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't change that many companies, and most times, like I went from Salesforce, I went to DocuSign because I knew Mike, and he and I were working at this customer together. So I already knew through Mike the culture of the company. So, but when I think about changing a job, I kind of look at people first, then I look at product, then I look at potential,
Mm,
in always in that order. So who are the people? What's their culture? How long have they been there? Where have they been there before? The companies they have always been successful represents the value that I share, right? So that I always start there. And to me, that's like the number one criteria. Then I look at the product and to saying, do I believe in the product, its mission, what it does, and all of that. And then the last thing I look at potential. Because a lot of time people look at to saying, oh, this is an AI company I want to work for because there is a huge potential. I
mhm.
think that's a mistake. I think if you work for great people, have a great product, they will create potential
That's right.
that most people can't imagine. And to me, potential is the last thing I look for.
I love it. I love it. I put Mike on camera because I want to get Mike some parting words with you, and I just like seeing you guys together. But last question, and then we'll wrap it up. Daniel Klein asked, was there a point in your career where you felt stuck or lost? If so, what did you do to get out of it?
Yeah, so I think we kind of cover all the time, right? I mean, I always had a knot in my stomach all the time because doing a big deals or what we did at DocuSign was creating new industries. You start with nothing. You have no idea what it is. And you learn. And failures are the big lessons. So it's just you learn to embrace failure, make it part of it. And that feeling of getting stuck is a wonderful thing. Like that's what really prompts you to come up with something when you feel cornered and desperate in a way. And to me, probably my best work has come out in those kind of situations.
Hmm.
And once you do that, now it builds your conviction to saying, oh, I can get out of this. I don't know how, but I just know I can over your life's experiences. So the answer is felt stuck all the time and felt vulnerable all the time. And to me, actually, that was probably the fuel I needed to be successful.
I love it, man. And that's where, again, that's where solutions arise is from a place of pain because you don't want to sit in
Yeah,
that pain. So you want to get out of it. And that
yeah,
it's really how you look at pain is you're looking at it as a good thing. Other people's like, I can't take it, versus like, let's get out of it and find a better way. It's you're looking at it as fuel versus something that is negative or bad. It's fuel
correct.
for growth and innovation.
Yeah,
Mike, thank you for connecting with Alpesh. This is a great conversation. I'm excited to get him on kind of the stage here.
He's the man.
He's the man.
Alpesh is the man. He likes to say, I'm a good sales guy, but that guy that was his champion that he converted from a blocker kicked me off that account when I had it. So Alpesh is a much better seller than I am. He didn't get kicked off. But one thing I feel like what I took take away from my time with Alpesh was his ability to create collaboration and connection as a culture and community, ultimately because he cared. And that was what and continues to be his superpower, is that he genuinely cares about other people, and that brings him joy. And as a result, he gets so many blessings in return. And as a result, he gets out of his head about what I can get out of this because he's so focused on helping others. And that has been true to his coworkers, his employees, his leadership, his customers, his partners, and continues to be even he's continuing to grow, continuing to go at the next level. So yeah, it's awesome to be part of that ride with him and to have him as a good friend of
yeah,
mine.
absolutely.
I love it. And I love what you just said, Mike. It's like you have to care about helping others succeed, and that's going to come back to you. It's like sales karma in such a big way, and you can't fake that. You really have to care more about serving others than you do yourself. And here's the irony, when you care more about helping others, you're thinking less about yourself.
Yep.
You get your cup filled. So I know when I get in my own head and self-absorbed, it's like make it about other people, focus on service. There is no nervous when you're in service. So I love that we ended with that. Drew, I'll give you some extra time. Alpesh, thank you. Mike, thank you for this great connection. You're getting some requests to coach for untap your sales potential, so we might be seeing more of you, Alpesh, if you're open to it. And
Always happy to. Happy
yeah,
to. It was my pleasure. And great to meet everybody on the call.
we'll get you into an office hours, and you can just have everyone shoot. I'm sure they'll love it. So, guys, thank you so much,
Right.
and I will see you guys next week. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you.